177 Israeli tanks, against 1,400 Syrian tanks and 115 artillery batteries. For days, one narrow valley, survival hanging by a thread. At the Battle of Kursk, over 8,000 tanks clashed across a front so massive it could be seen from space, the largest armored battle in human history, where the fate of World War II was decided in fields of burning steel. In the desert sand of Iraq, American M1 Abrams tanks destroyed an entire Iraqi armored brigade in 23 minutes without losing a single vehicle, a display of technological dominance so overwhelming it redefined modern warfare. These aren't just battles. These are the moments when tons of steel, explosive shells, and raw human courage collided in the most intense tank showdowns ever fought, where survival was measured in seconds, where one wrong move meant death, where the roar of engines and the crack of cannons decided the fate of nations. Today, we're taking you inside the 5 most brutal, most decisive, most intense tank battles in military history. The tank revolutionized warfare. Before its introduction in World War I, battlefields were defined by trenches, barbed wire, and stalemate. Then came the tank, a mobile fortress that could cross obstacles, withstand small arms fire, and deliver devastating firepower while on the move. Tanks weren't invincible. They required fuel, ammunition, trained crews, and most importantly, tactical brilliance. The greatest tank battles in history weren't won by the side with the most tanks. They were won by commanders who understood terrain, logistics, and the brutal mathematics of armored combat. What makes a tank battle intense? 3 factors. First, scale. The sheer number of armored vehicles engaged. Thousands of tanks maneuvering, firing, exploding across landscapes measured in hundreds of square miles. Second, desperation. Battles where defeat meant annihilation, where soldiers fought knowing there was no retreat, no reinforcement, no second chance. Third, innovation. Battles that introduced new tactics, new technology, or proved that old doctrines were obsolete. The 5 battles we're about to examine meet all 3 criteria. They span 70 years of warfare, from the frozen steppes of Russia to the scorching deserts of the Middle East, from World War II's apocalyptic Eastern Front to the precision-guided warfare of the 21st century. Each battle tells a different story, but they all share one truth. When tanks clash at close range, when crews can see the faces of their enemies through their sights, warfare becomes personal, brutal, and absolutely terrifying. Let's begin with the battle that nearly changed the outcome of World War II. July 5, 1943, the Eastern Front. 2 million soldiers, 6,000 tanks, 4,000 aircraft, all concentrated around a small Soviet city called Kursk. This wasn't just a battle. This was Hitler's last chance to win the war in the East. After the catastrophic defeat at Stalingrad, Nazi Germany needed a decisive victory to stabilize the Eastern Front. Operation Citadel was designed to do exactly that: circle and destroy Soviet forces in a massive pincer movement, eliminating over 1 million Red Army soldiers in a single blow. The Germans assembled their finest, the elite SS Panzer divisions, new Tiger and Panther tanks with their thick armor and deadly 88mm guns, and commanders who had perfected blitzkrieg warfare across Europe. But Soviet intelligence had broken German codes. They knew the attack was coming, and they prepared the most elaborate defensive system in military history. 8 defensive belts stretching 250 kilometers deep, laced with over 400,000 mines, anti-tank guns, and dug-in infantry. When the German panzers rolled forward on July 5th, they immediately encountered hell. Soviet mines shredded tank treads. Anti-tank guns firing from concealed positions knocked out dozens of German tanks before they even saw the enemy. The Tigers and Panthers, technological marvels that were supposed to dominate the battlefield, became stuck in muddy terrain or ran out of fuel. The most intense moment came at Prokhorovka on July 12th. In a field just 3 miles wide, over 800 tanks from both sides collided in the largest single-day tank engagement in history. Imagine this: Soviet T-34 tanks charging at full speed directly toward German Tigers and Panthers. The Soviets knew their lighter tanks couldn't penetrate German frontal armor at long range, so they closed the distance. At point-blank range, maybe 50 meters, both tanks could kill each other. The battle devolved into a swirling melee of burning steel. Tank commanders stood in open turrets, directing fire through smoke so thick they could barely see. Crews cooked alive as shells penetrated armor and ignited ammunition. Some Soviet tankers, their vehicles disabled, climbed out and threw Molotov cocktails at German tanks. German Tigers, surrounded by multiple T-34s, like cornered lions, destroying 5 Soviet tanks before finally succumbing. The ground became littered with destroyed tanks, some still burning days later. One German officer described it as a graveyard of steel. Over 700 tanks were destroyed or disabled in a single day at Prokhorovka alone. By July 23rd, Operation Citadel had failed. The Germans had advanced just 25 miles at catastrophic cost. Soviet counteroffensives began immediately, pushing the Wehrmacht back toward Germany. Hitler never launched another major offensive in the East. The statistics tell the story. Germany lost over 1,700 tanks and assault guns at Kursk. The Soviets lost far more, perhaps 6,000 tanks, but they could replace them. Germany could not. One Soviet tank commander, writing in his diary after the battle, simply wrote, "I have looked into the gates of hell. They are made of steel and fire." October 6, 1973, Yom Kippur, the holiest day in the Jewish calendar. Israel stands down for prayer and fasting. The military is on minimal alert. And at 2 p.m., Syria and Egypt launch a coordinated surprise attack. On the Golan Heights, 177 Israeli tanks face 1,400 Syrian tanks and 115 artillery batteries. The odds? 8-1. The mission? Hold the line for just 24 hours until reserves arrive. They held for 4 days. Pause. The Golan Heights isn't just strategically valuable, it's existential for Israel. From its elevated positions, Syrian artillery could hit Israeli population centers in the valley below. If Syria captured the Golan, Israeli civilians would be in immediate danger. There was no falling back. There was no retreat. The battle that unfolded, particularly in a narrow valley that became known as the Valley of Tears, represents one of the most desperate defensive stands in modern military history. Israeli tanks were British-made Centurions, upgraded with American guns and Israeli modifications. Tough, reliable, but old. The Syrians brought Soviet T-55s and T-62s, modern tanks with night vision equipment, infrared sights, and numerical superiority so overwhelming that Israeli crews knew they'd have to kill 8 Syrian tanks for every Israeli tank lost just to break even. When the Syrian artillery barrage ended and the tank assault began, Israeli commanders faced an impossible situation. Tanks were approaching from multiple directions. Communication systems were overwhelmed. Some Israeli positions were overrun in the first hours. Then extraordinary things began happening.